Hello boxing fans, I'm James Smith. Today I caught up with Margaret Goodman at her horse riding facility here in Las Vegas, and we spoke about the health and well-being of professional fighters. What really jumped out at you, sitting ringside and watching two guys, and so many of your fights were at such a high level fights too, watching these guys and then having to be called into the ring to check to see if we got, what really jumped out at you most, made an impact about the sport of boxing and your position in it?
Well, I mean, one thing you notice as a physician dealing with fighters, they're like the nicest patients you could ever have, and they're really concerned about their health. And you're in a very intimate setting, seeing them actually sustain injuries right at that moment, and that doesn't happen when you're a doctor. Typically, even if you're an ER doctor, the person comes after they've been injured. So you're actually watching the process as it's happening. So it was an extreme learning experience for me, and it really helped me as a neurologist understand concussion. And I just learned more and more every fight I worked, and it's hard to not fall in love with the fighters. They're just great.
And having somebody again that's a neurologist there, to me, because I've been involved in the sport for over 40 years, and football players have ankle and knee and shoulder and neck. Baseball players have of course the elbow and the shoulders, but boxers, it's hand and it's head. I'm of the opinion that any fighter who has a lengthy career is going to suffer some type of brain damage. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that it just goes without saying. I mean, I think the research that's being done on chronic traumatic encephalopathy is teaching us that, even if we didn't want to recognize it before, what's going on in the NFL. But I think what they're finding, which is even more interesting, is that there's individuals that maybe only participated in contact sports or combat sports when they were really young, high school age, maybe college football or boxing or soccer, and we're seeing changes in their brains. So it's not like you have to have that long, lengthy exposure to really suffer damage. So we don't really know. And I think time will tell how serious, but obviously it goes without saying that you've got to sustain some damage. Getting hit in the head isn't good for anybody.
Explain the differences, if you will, between Parkinson's syndrome and pugilistic dementia.
Well, I would say typically Parkinson's syndrome is just an offshoot of that. Some people that suffer from dementia pugilistica or punch-drunk syndrome don't have a lot of Parkinsonian symptoms, although when you list the symptoms that you're going to develop from that condition, you'll list Parkinson's type symptoms: the rigidity, the stiffness, the slowness, the soft voice. You'll always see that, maybe tremors, stooped posture, which are all Parkinson's symptoms. You'll see that part of a dementia pugilistica. But what sometimes you'll see in dementia pugilistica will just be cognitive problems, memory problems, just an actual dementia. So I would say one is kind of an offshoot of the other, but they can both be interchangeable in some instances.
The NFL's, they're trying to do so many different things to take away the head trauma. But in boxing, I mean, other than, maybe guys having better neurological exams and maybe learning when to quit, what can be done for a fighter? I mean, it's part and parcel of what they do.
I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think anyone knows the answer. I mean, I think some of the research that they're doing at the Lou Ruvo Center, that Cleveland Clinic Center here in Las Vegas, may help tell us, but it may tell us what we already know, that just getting hit in the head isn't good for you. And there's other factors. There may be genetic factors, anatomical factors, heredity factors, the kind of fights you're in, the type of exposure, the length of the exposure, the number of rounds, all of those different things may contribute to whether or not someone develops a dementia pugilistica, or maybe only develops minor symptoms or develops no symptoms. You just don't know the answer to that. And I think that's why more research is the only way we're going to find out. But obviously we all know that, any exposure and getting hit in the head isn't good. So obviously the athletes have a better chance of avoiding that if they protect themselves and they don't get hit much, they don't spar as much. It used to, I think when we looked at Terry Norris years ago, who obviously developed dementia pugilistica as a result of boxing, part of his problem was that he used to spar a lot. And whether or not he had any other risk factors, I don't know, but just sparring itself, day after day, week after week. Obviously fighters need to spar, but too much punishment to the head isn't good for anybody.
You know, it's funny you mention him because I had interviewed him from the embryonic stages of his career all the way through. And I remember telling my ex-wife and people even with the commission or anybody that would listen to me, even Don King, I said, something's going on with Terry. And I could see it because of, you know, just the interviews, but I could even see it before it showed in the ring.
Well, that's the other problem, is that sometimes what happens, and you bring up a very good point, is that the public or the people that understand the sport are often aware that a fighter is having problems before a commission or before the physicians are. And it's because you know what you're looking at. And you've seen the transformation of that individual over time. And so that's what's even more important, is to have comparison exams, comparison studies, so that by the time we think that somebody's really having problems, it's too late. So you have to find what are those subtle changes in someone that are indicative that they're going to have problems and that they need to end their career. I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that, but I think we're beginning to ask the questions a lot more, which is probably as valuable.
You know, my stance for a long time, when I fought back in the 80s, we did same-day weigh-ins. And I'm of the opinion, and I think you know it, that, you know, a fighter is trained to get at a certain weight. He gets his weight down the month of the fight, and then in 2 weeks before the fight, he's pretty much at weight. Weigh in the day of the fight, have a couple meals, fight. And then when you get older in your career and you can't make weight, by golly, you go up in weight. I totally get the reasons why they put in the day before weigh-in to let a guy rehydrate, but it has backfired in many ways.
No, I agree, and I think, you know, the reasons for having the weigh-in approximately 24 hours before a fight was good reasoning, because they thought that the fighters were too dehydrated. But I think a lot of things, you know, almost like this Bermuda Triangle, where fighters don't fight as often, so they tend to get out of shape between fights. And, you know, sometimes they're forced or to accept fights where they don't, in a weight class where they don't belong, or they're obviously fighting in a weight class where they never belonged. And so those kind of things happen all the time. And I think what we've seen recently is the only smart thing to do is to go to same-day weigh-in. The best thing would be serial weigh-ins, you know, and I'm not talking about 30 days before, although obviously I could see how that would be helpful if you knew you had a fight, but a lot of these fighters take fights on short notice. So, you know, yes, should the weigh-in be the day before and then the day of the fight, where the athlete's only allowed to put on a certain amount of weight depending on the weight class that they're competing on? Yeah, sure. That would be the ideal thing. You know, and some of the arguments against that were, well, it's easier in Las Vegas, a place like here where the fighters come to town a day or two before, they're here, they're in the hotel, whereas if you're having fights in New York, the fighters could be, you know, coming from all these different places, they may only come in that day, and so you've got all those different problems, but I think that somebody needs to step up. And, you know, Greg Serb with the Pennsylvania Commission has always been a huge proponent of going back to the same-day weigh-in, or serial weigh-ins too. I don't know which one he favors more right now, but I think that's the way it has to be. I mean, other than that, you've got fighters, you know, putting on just ungodly amounts of weight after the weigh-in, and it's all water weight. And it doesn't help them. It just makes them slower. But they tend to do it, and everybody does it, and it becomes this vicious cycle. And look at how unhealthy it is for them to dehydrate themselves so severely to make weight in the first place.
And how unfair it is for the guy that does come in at the proper weight, and he's fighting a guy 3, 4, 5 divisions higher. I told everybody, why didn't they listen to Smitty? I kind of felt good when the whole Muhammad Ali came into play, and I really thought that was going to do something, but it seems like, where is it today?
You know, it's still there, but as we've mentioned, it just doesn't have the teeth. And so people forget about it. And in truth, of the problems that boxing has, the Muhammad Ali Act itself doesn't fix what needs to be fixed. You know, I think it helps that we've got, you know, an ambulance at ringside. You know, you've got to have, I think, at least 2 doctors at a fight. I think it's helped contractually as far as the fighters not getting manipulated as much. But as far as the health and safety aspects, it just needs to be really added to, let's put it that way, or just a whole new bill. And I think that's what Senator McCain was initially trying to do, was create a new bill that would really expand a lot of the regulations that need to be improved and that actually even need to be set up So we'll have to see. I wish there was better news on that front, but yeah, no, as far as federal oversight, there's very little.
Everything in boxing seems to start out as a great sprint, but we don't do it as a marathon that well.
That's true, and who suffers? Who suffers? But the kids you were talking about that end up, because they're hit in the head and they may not be able to function as well once they're in their 40s or even earlier sometimes.
What message would Margaret Goodman give to the state regulators out there? What message, what do you think right now at this point, 2013, is the most paramount message you can give to people regulating this sport?
I think that it's been this for a long time, that they really need to band together to support a federal commission or a national commission. I mean, it's the only way things are going to change. And maybe that'll never happen. I don't think that it's going to happen too soon. I think all the efforts that Senator McCain put in place have just gone by the wayside. There's too many political people on the opposite side that don't want it to happen. But unless there's some central body, things are going to just continue to be disjointed. And I think that you know, it hurts me to see that boxing has become a niche sport. You know, it's such an important endeavor. I mean, there's no athletes braver than a boxer getting into the ring like that. And anybody that's never been to a fight or really watched boxing, I think once they do see it, they fall in love with it because the fighters are so wonderful. And so if we really care about them that much, if the regulators say they care about them and they care about health and safety, the only way to really demonstrate that is to work together to create some kind of national body to oversee the sport.
I call them the most common and uncommon of all athletes, and you certainly have been one that has been a great support system for the fighters, still are, with the great work you're doing with VADA. Keep up the great work, and damn it, we miss your red hair at ringside. Now I have the best hair in boxing.
You do. You have great hair.